How often in our lives, sometimes we wonder whether God has chosen the right people to lead us, whether in an organization or whether in the church. And this is simply because sometimes we look at the leaders, they seemed to be unworthy leaders because they lacked integrity, they lacked consistency, or they could be simply crooks even. And so it is difficult for us to try to comprehend the plan of God when we have leaders who are not, in our assessment, fit to serve us or to serve the community. And so we wonder, therefore, are these so-called leaders jeopardizing the plan of God? And I think today the scripture readings wants to make it clear that the divine plan of God will always be accomplished according to His will. Nothing can stop this inexorable plan of God for us all. The examples that we read in today's scripture reading, we have the case of Joseph. Joseph was, of course, one of the most important key figures in the establishment of Israel as a nation. And of course, his father, Israel, known as Jacob. Now, Joseph had a plan marked out for him by God himself. And Joseph, we are told in today's first reading, he dreamed dreams. And he had great dreams about himself, of course. How he would be honored by his brothers. And even his parents will have to bow down before him, like sheaves bending down. He is the one. And all the stars will gather around him because he will be the most important person. And of course, Joseph was not only a dreamer, he was arrogant. He was boastful. If that was really his dream, he should have just kept the dream to himself and not so loudly spoke to his brothers and make them feel nervous and jealous. Of course, we can understand brothers Joseph. He was the youngest. He was telling them what to do. And of course, the other brothers were jealous and resentful of him. And so that's why they plot to kill him, to eliminate him. He was really too much, So sometimes I feel that Joseph actually dug his own well for them to throw him in because he was such a big mouth fella. But also, Israel, his father, was no better. He was practicing favoritism. He made him a special coat, long sleeves. And of course, again, we cannot blame the brothers for being jealous because a kind of injustice. So that's why siblings rivalry at home is very common. Not only siblings rivalry, everybody is having this kind of insecurity everywhere. And so this is the real challenge. And yet, it is also important to recognize while all these people that have been chosen, whether Joseph, whether Jacob, they were imperfect people. They were ordinary human beings like us all, have our own defects, have our own shortcomings. I'm sure Israel had a shortcoming because he was the last son, so he loved Joseph more than the rest. I'm sure you parents do. If you are children, you know which one you love more, but we try not to show it. At the end of the day, it is important, therefore, to ask ourselves, even in our own limitations, actually, the plan of God cannot be destroyed. God made use of weak people like Joseph, like Israel, to accomplish His plan. Regardless whether the brothers were jealous of Joseph or not, it was all within the plan of God. Even the Joseph brothers who attempted to kill him, threw him down into the well and then sold him, it was within that plan of God. God actually was writing straight in crooked lines. All these events, good or bad, it is all embraced and within the plan of God. So for us human beings, we cannot see how something that is evil, how something that is not quite right can be used to further the plan of God. In fact, if Joseph's brothers were not jealous of him, then Joseph would not have been sold to the Egyptians. And if Joseph had not been sold to the Egyptians, they would have died in Canaan. they would not have been able to go to Egypt to multiply and to become a great nation. So on hindsight, we see the wisdom and the plan of God. And so too, in today's gospel reading, we have the chief priests and the elders of the people. They were called to be protectors of the people of Israel, to lead them. But as Jesus mentioned, and he was actually hinting at them, that they were irresponsible. Just like the fathers, the prophets, they have been killing because they could not accept Jesus. First and foremost, he was not a member of the established religious institution. He was not even a rabbi. He didn't go to any theological school. I mean, from nowhere he came and he started preaching, and he got a lot of people to follow him. And then also he was teaching things that apparently upset the status quo, the customs of those days, challenging certain practices. And of course, they found him a nuisance. And so, again, you see how God writes straight in crooked lines. They were against him. They were plotting to eliminate him. When we look back, we can see how the wisdom of God is shown in his choice. When Caiaphas, just before, in John's Gospel, before Jesus was put to death, he said, it's better for one man to die to save the nation than for the whole nation to be destroyed. And indirectly, he was thinking about Jesus. But actually, the truth was, he thought by destroying Jesus, killing Jesus, the nation would be saved. But Jesus did save the nation, but in a different way, of course. Not only nation, but the whole world. And Jesus in today's gospel said, what will happen therefore to the vineyard? Because they didn't welcome the heir, of course, the Son of God. And he said, these people will be put to a wretched end. And that again happens because the religious leaders, they did not listen to Jesus. They were politically bent on revolting against the Romans. In the end, of course, we know that Israel was destroyed by the Romans. It was a very sad end. And so, today, the gospel reminds us, and Jesus said, it is the stone rejected by the builders that became the keystone. This was the Lord's doing, and it's wonderful to see. I believe that we need to walk in faith. Even things do not appear to be right for us. Then we wonder, is the hand of God at work that He is? Even when leaders are not living up to their responsibility, even if these are bad leaders, God will know how to make use of their weaknesses to further His plan. And I think it's very important to really believe that God is in control. And that is why in the responsorial psalm, we are told, remember the wonders of the Lord. And in this responsorial psalm, of course, it was a narration of how Joseph, he was sold as a slave. And we know that Joseph had a very complicated time in Egypt. He went through a difficult time. And then in the end, he was appointed as the Prime Minister of Egypt. So things worked out the way nobody expects. And I think it's important that somehow God is guiding us, God is guiding the church. We will never be able to see, perhaps, sometimes in our own lifetime, the outcome. But I believe that if every one of us, we trust in God, we play our role, God will triumph. God will show forth His wonders at the end. In fact, some people are suggesting, even the late Pope Benedict XVI was suggesting that we are going through a very difficult time, this church, very difficult time. And because of all the different views, because of the different trends in the world, we are going a very difficult time, not just the world, but even for us as church, how to unite the church together. Sometimes we look as if the church is losing credibility. The church is losing direction. The church is no more able to stand up to her faith, to her beliefs. And even religious leaders are compromising their position, the gospel, in order to align with the world. And so sometimes we wonder, with all these scandals and compromises, where the church stands at the end of the day. So many people take to heart what Pope Benedict prophesied. He says maybe the church one day will be trimmed to its lowest level until we are no longer a powerful church in the world. And then it will only left the remnants. Those who are really faithful, they will stand. And then the church will be renewed and be born again. Will that happen? I do not know. We do not know. But I think even if that happens, even Pope Benedict is very positive. Even if the church were really to be wiped out because of all these scandals and challenges facing the church, the remnants will survive. And these remnants will eventually bring the church alive again. So, as I've said, let us walk in faith. Let us continue to do what we possibly can. And God will certainly make use of us. And if we are leaders, we know that we are not perfect as well. So we can just only offer ourselves as best as we could. And God will use whatever good we do, whatever weaknesses we have, God again will use them in such a way to fulfill His divine plan for humanity.